A tale of two broken souls, a lonely road, and a discovery that would shatter everything Chase Hale thought he knew about luck, love, and second chances. What he found that misty October morning? It wasn't just a woman left for dead. It was the beginning of something that would flip his entire world upside down. But the truth about who she really was, that revelation, it would leave him speechless. This is a story about losing everything, finding hope in the most unexpected place, and realizing that sometimes fate has a twisted, beautiful way of putting the right people on the wrong roads at exactly the right time. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The October fog hung thick and low that morning, clinging to the ground like a heavy, wet blanket. The only sound was the crunch of Chase Hale's boots against the gravel as he walked along County Road 47. This was a stretch of forgotten asphalt, the kind of place that rarely saw more than 3 cars a day. He'd been walking for about 40 minutes now, roughly 3 miles from the old farmhouse. He was heading toward the Hutchinson place, where he'd promised to help repair a barn roof. The pay wasn't much, but it was something, and something was a hell of a lot better than nothing when you had a 6-year-old daughter depending on you. That's when he saw it. At first, it just looked like a pile of dark clothes, something someone had dumped in the drainage ditch. But no, something about the shape made his stomach clench. Not clothes, a person. "Hey!" Chase broke into a run, his heart instantly hammering against his ribs. "Hey, can you hear me?" As he got closer, the details came into horrifying focus. It was a woman. She was lying motionless in the shallow, muddy ditch, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Her business suit was torn and filthy, caked in mud and dried blood. Her face, it was bruised beyond recognition, swollen, purple. This wasn't from a fall. This was the kind of damage that came from fists, from pure, brutal violence. Chase dropped to his knees beside her, his old construction site first aid training kicking in. He pressed 2 trembling fingers against her neck, searching, praying. There, faint, but it was there, a pulse. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. Her skin was ice cold beneath his fingertips. This wasn't an accident. Nobody falls into a ditch and ends up looking like this. Someone had beaten this woman, beaten her badly, and left her here to die. But then, he saw something else, something that made his blood run even colder than her skin. Her legs, the way they were positioned, the muscle wasting, visible even through the torn fabric of her slacks. And there, half buried in the dirt beside her, were track marks in the mud, like something with wheels had been there. A wheelchair. Oh God, someone had beaten a woman who couldn't walk and dumped her body out here in the absolute middle of nowhere. Chase looked up and down the empty, fog-shrouded road. Not a single car, not a house in sight. And of course, no phone service out here. The nearest phone was back at Mrs. Dottie's place, a quarter-mile past his own farmhouse. He checked the woman's breathing again. Shallow, labored. She didn't have hours. She probably didn't even have one. The decision came fast. He carefully lifted her, cradling her the same way he used to carry his daughter. The woman weighed almost nothing. As he lifted her, her head lolled against his chest, and he heard a soft, unconscious whimper of pain. "I've got you," he whispered as much to himself as to her. "You're going to be okay. I promise." The walk back felt like miles. His arms burned. His back screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Every few minutes he'd pause just long enough to check if she was still breathing, shallow, but still there, and then he'd keep moving. The fog began to lift just a little as he finally saw the outline of his farmhouse through the trees. The old structure looked even more run down in the morning light. Peeling paint, a sagging porch, that damn hole in the roof he kept meaning to patch. Chase shouldered his way through the front door and headed straight for his own bedroom. He laid the woman as gently as he could on his bed and grabbed the first aid kit from the hall closet. He got a better look at her now. The muscle atrophy in her legs was severe. This was years of paralysis, not months. The bruising on her arms showed where someone had gripped her, hard. Defensive wounds on her hands where she'd tried. She'd tried to fight back. This wasn't random violence, this was personal. Chase ran. Chase. He left her there, ran out the door and sprinted to Mrs. Dottie's house, pounding on her door until the elderly woman finally answered, clutching her robe. Chase! What in heaven's name? I need your phone. Now, he panted. There's a woman at my house. Someone hurt her. Bad. Mrs. Dottie, God bless her, handed him her old rotary phone without a single question. 911, what's your location? 1247 County Road 47. I found a woman on the side of the road. She's been beaten, she's unconscious, and I think she's paralyzed. Chase rattled off everything he could. Pulse rate, breathing, visible injuries. Then came the words that made his stomach drop. Sir, there's been a major accident on Interstate 88. All units are rerouted. Our nearest available ambulance, sir, it's approximately 3 hours away. 3 hours. Understood. He ran back to his house, back to the bedroom. She was exactly as he'd left her, pale, cold, barely breathing. Chase pulled a chair up beside the bed. He sat. He watched. He checked her pulse every 10 minutes, and he talked to her. He talked, even though he knew she couldn't hear him, because the silence in the room felt too much like death. Whoever you are, he said softly, you're a fighter. I can see that. So just keep breathing, okay? Just keep breathing. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. And then, her eyes fluttered open. Chase leaned forward instantly. Hey, you're safe. Don't try to move. You're safe. Her eyes were wild with terror, unfocused, searching for threats that weren't there. Please, she whispered, her voice a broken rasp. Please, don't let them find me. No one's going to hurt you here, I promise. My chair, her words came in broken fragments. They took my chair, said I wouldn't need it, burned it. They burned it right in front of me. Rage, cold and pure, coiled in Chase's gut. Veronica, Aka, the woman whispered. My sister. She watched. She just watched. Shh. Save your strength, Chase urged. Help is coming. They left me to die. A single tear rolled down her bruised cheek, cutting a clean path through the grime. She said, Our father was a fool, giving me the company, when I can't even walk. Then her eyes rolled back. She was unconscious again. The ambulance finally arrived. 2 hours and 47 minutes after his call, the paramedics rushed in with professional, almost jarring efficiency. Sir, did she say anything? She was conscious for maybe a minute, said something about her sister, Veronica. Said her sister watched while they burned her wheelchair. The paramedic's expression darkened. We'll note that this woman's been drugged, heavy sedatives. On top of these injuries, someone wanted her dead. Which hospital are you taking her to? St. Catherine's in Bloomington. Chase nodded, his jaw set. I'm following you there. Chase ran back to Mrs. Dottie's house. His daughter, Belle, was there, just having breakfast. The little girl looked up from her cereal, her face all light and innocence. Daddy, you was back early. Chase knelt down, forcing a calm he didn't feel. Hey, Peanut. Yeah, something happened this morning. I found a lady who's hurt, and I need to make sure she gets to the hospital safely. Can you be a big girl and come with me? Belle's big brown eyes went wide. Is she hurt bad? Pretty bad, yeah. Then we got to help her. Belle jumped down from her chair and ran to grab her stuffed rabbit. Mr. Bunny always makes me feel better when I'm scared. Maybe the hurt lady needs him too. The drive to St. Catherine's took an hour of Chase driving his rattling old truck behind the ambulance, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while Belle sat quietly in her car seat, clutching Mr. Bunny. A police officer approached Chase almost as soon as he walked through the emergency room doors. Sir, I'm Officer Martinez. I understand you're the one who found the victim. For the next hour, Chase gave his statement over and over, while Belle clung to his leg, her eyes wide with the sterile, hurried environment of the hospital. "Mr. Hale, do you have any idea who this woman is?" "No. She was unconscious most of the time. She said a name, Veronica, her sister." Officer Martinez wrote something in his notebook. "Between you and me," he said, lowering his voice, "this looks like attempted murder. But she did survive. Because of you." The officer met his eyes. "You saved her life, Mr. Hale." "Daddy," Belle whispered, tugging on his shirt, "can we wait here till the sleeping lady wakes up?" Chase looked at his daughter's earnest face, then down the long, antiseptic hallway. "Yeah, sweetheart, we can wait." So they waited. They waited for hours. The fluorescent lights of the waiting room buzzed overhead. A kind nurse, seeing the little girl trying so hard to be patient, provided crayons and paper. Belle drew pictures of princesses with big, sparkly crowns. Chase just sat. He sat in one of those awful, uncomfortable plastic chairs, his mind finally dangerously wandering to the places he'd been trying so hard not to go for the last 2 years. He thought about Andrea. He thought about the day she'd collapsed, the cold shock of the doctor's office. Stage 4, they'd said. Weeks, not months. He thought about Marcus, his business partner, the man who had stolen everything, picked the bones of their company clean, while Chase was still buried in the fog of grief. The lawyers, the bankruptcy, the creditors who took the house, the cars, everything. The farmhouse, the one he'd run back to this morning, had been Andrea's childhood home. It was falling apart, inherited from her parents, but it was all they had left. For 2 long years, Chase had been doing just that, surviving, just barely. But this morning, when he'd found that woman in the ditch, something inside him had shifted. For the first time in 2 years, he'd felt useful. He'd felt necessary. "Mr. Hale?" Chase looked up, blinking, pulling himself back from the past. A doctor in scrubs stood before him. "I'm Dr. Patel. She's stable. Critical, but stable." Chase felt his shoulders drop in relief he didn't even know he was holding. "She has 3 cracked ribs," the doctor continued. "Severe contusions and, yes, evidence of long-term paralysis. Someone also drugged her heavily. This was a planned attack." Chase felt sick. Can she have visitors?" "Not yet. She's unconscious and will likely remain that way for at least another day. Maybe more." That evening, long after he'd tucked Belle into her bed, Chase sat on the sagging porch steps and just looked up at the stars. He thought about the woman lying in that hospital bed. He thought about the absolute terror in her eyes during that one lucid minute. He thought about whoever had hurt her and why. He'd go back tomorrow. He had to. He'd keep his promise to Belle. The stars offered no answers. They rarely did. Chase woke to Belle bouncing on his bed at 6 in the morning. "Daddy, we got to go see the hurt lady." They arrived at St. Catherine's at 8:30. The nurse at the station smiled when she saw them. "Back again, are we? She's still unconscious, sweetie. But I bet she'd love to see your drawings when she wakes." "Can we put them on her wall?" Belle asked, holding them up. "I think that would be wonderful." In the private room, Chase saw the woman in proper, clear lighting for the first time. The dim, foggy morning light and the harsh ER strobes hadn't done her justice. She was younger than he'd thought, early 30s maybe. And even with the horrifying deep purple bruising, he could see delicate features, high cheekbones, long blonde hair, matted and dull, but clearly expensive. This was the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms, not beaten and left for dead in a ditch. Belle walked on her tiptoes and placed Mr. Bunny on the bedside table, right next to the woman's hand. "There," she whispered. "Now you won't be lonely." Hours passed. At 11 a.m., Officer Martinez appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hale, we have an ID, and this situation, it's a lot bigger than we initially thought." Chase's stomach tightened. "Who is she?" Officer Martinez pulled out a photograph, a professional headshot. The woman in the photo was smiling, confident, powerful. It was her. "Her name is Valentina Cross. She's the CEO of Cross Technologies. She's been officially missing for 2 days. Chase stared at the photograph, then at the bruised woman in the bed. Cross Technologies. He knew that name. Everyone did. One of the biggest tech companies in the country, worth billions. Her family, Officer Martinez said, his voice low. We think they're the ones who did this. We're investigating. But this woman, she had 70% ownership of a multi-billion-dollar company. Certain people, apparently, thought her wheelchair made her unfit to lead. The officer's expression hardened. We're looking very closely at her stepsister, Veronica, and several board members. Someone tried to murder her for money, for power. Mr. Hale, we'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. Chase just nodded, his mind reeling. Whatever she needs. Daddy? Bell tugged his sleeve. What's a CEO? It means she's in charge of a big company, sweetheart. A very important person. Bell looked at Valentina, still and silent in the bed. But she's hurt real bad. Being important doesn't stop people from being hurt, does it? No, baby, Chase said, his voice thick. It doesn't. Maybe she needs friends more than she needs being important, Bell decided. Friends don't leave you in ditches. Chase reached over and smoothed his daughter's hair. You're absolutely right, sweetheart. The next day, Valentina was still unconscious. Chase and Bell came again. On the third day, Bell brought a book. Can I read to her, Daddy? Mommy used to say that sick people can hear stories, even when they're sleeping. Yes, sweetheart, Chase said, his throat tight. I think she'd like that. So Bell read. She sat in the big visitor's chair, her little legs dangling, and read about dragons and brave knights, stumbling over the big words, making up funny voices. Chase just watched and felt something stir in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or just the strange, forgotten comfort of feeling needed again. On the fourth day, everything changed. They arrived to find Valentina's room bustling with activity. Nurses, doctors. The crowd parted, and Chase saw her. She was awake. She was sitting up in bed, looking pale and exhausted, but unmistakably conscious. Her dark eyes scanned the room, landed on Chase, and locked. You, she said. Her voice was a rasp, but it was firm. You're the one who found me. Yeah, Chase said, stepping forward. That was me. The nurses told me. They said you carried me 3 miles and saved my life. Anyone would have done the same. No. Valentina's voice was absolute. They wouldn't have. Most people would have kept walking, especially, she gestured to her legs hidden under the white hospital blanket, especially once they realized I couldn't walk. You're not broken, Chase said, the words coming out before he could stop them. Their eyes met and held for a long, silent moment. Daddy, can I say hi now? Belle whispered loudly. Valentina's intense expression softened as she saw the little girl. Is this your daughter? This is Belle. Belle, this is Valentina Cross. You've got a pretty name, Belle said, walking closer. It sounds like a princess name. Valentina's laugh was weak, but it was genuine. Not quite, sweetie. I left my bunny for you, Belle explained, pointing, so you wouldn't be lonely. Did he help? Valentina's eyes, which had been so hard and focused, suddenly filled with tears. She reached out a bruised hand for the stuffed rabbit. He helped very much, she whispered. Thank you, Belle. A man in an expensive suit cleared his throat from the doorway. Miss Cross, we should let you rest. No, Valentina said, her voice instantly regaining its steel. Give me a few minutes alone with Mr. Hale and his daughter. Please. The room emptied. Valentina studied Chase. She said, Belle, Chase began, choosing his words carefully. 2 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer. I lost my business to a crooked partner. Lost everything. Everything except my daughter and an old broken-down farmhouse. He met Valentina's eyes. I know what it feels like when the world kicks you when you're down. So when I saw you in that ditch, I wasn't going to be one of those people who walks away. Valentina's expression shifted. They tried to kill me, she said, her voice flat, quiet. My stepsister, Veronica, and 3 board members. They drugged me, drove me out to that road and destroyed my wheelchair, burned it, while I watched. Her voice trembled, just for a second. Veronica said, "Our father was a fool for leaving me the company when I can't even walk." Chase felt that same cold rage coil in his gut. That's evil. Yeah, but I had been gathering evidence of their embezzlement for months. They decided to remove the problem. Except the problem is still here, Chase said firmly. Because of you. Valentina's voice dropped to a whisper. You saved my life, Chase Hale. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. And more than that, I don't have anyone. No family I can trust. For days, the only people who came to see me were a stranger and his 6-year-old daughter. Chase thought about his own suffocating isolation since Andrea's death. Yeah, he said softly. I know exactly how that feels. Their eyes met again, and this time, the connection was absolute, undeniable. Look, Daddy. Belle suddenly pointed excitedly at the monitor. This machine shows her heartbeat. Valentina looked at Belle, and a real unguarded laugh escaped her. The sound completely transformed her face. Chase found himself smiling too. A real smile. He felt something warm, something he hadn't felt in years, unfurling in his chest. Maybe that morning on the foggy road. Maybe it had been the start of something neither of them could have possibly predicted. Maybe it was something that looked a lot like hope. Over the next 2 weeks, Chase and Belle became fixtures at St. Catherine's. They visited every single day. Chase brought bad hospital coffee and soup and conversation. Belle brought endless drawings and stories from school. Valentina began to heal. The bruises on her face faded from that terrifying purple to a sickly yellow-green. She could sit up in a chair without wincing, but without her wheelchair, she was trapped. The custom one I had, it took 6 months to build, she explained one afternoon, her voice flat. It was designed specifically for my needs. It cost more than most people's cars, and they just destroyed it. Poured gasoline on it and lit a match. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Chase saw the pain underneath, the violation. You're not helpless, Chase said firmly, cutting through her narrative. You're running your company from a hospital bed. You're building a case against the people who tried to murder you. That is the opposite of helpless. Valentina smiled, a small, sad smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The hospital is discharging me next week, she said, but I can't go back to my penthouse. It's a crime scene, and I can't go to a rehab facility. Veronica already tried to have me committed. If I check in voluntarily, it just gives credibility to her story that I'm unfit. So, where will you go? Chase asked. Valentina looked out the window. I don't know. Chase opened his mouth. He closed it. He thought about his sagging porch and the hole in his roof. He thought about the memory of his late wife that still filled every corner. And then he remembered Andrea's last words. Promise me you'll stay open to love, Chase. Stay open. Stay with us, he heard himself say. Valentina blinked, turning from the window. What? The farmhouse, it's not fancy at all, but there's room. You'd be safe. My neighbor, Mrs. Dottie, he continued, the idea forming as he spoke. She has an old wheelchair from when her husband was sick. And I was a contractor. I can build ramps. I can modify things. Chase, why would you do this? He met her gaze. Because when I look at you, I don't see CEO Valentina Cross. I just see someone who needs help. Belle tugged his sleeve. Can I give her Mr. Bunny now, Daddy? Valentina watched the little girl, her eyes unreadable. You're a good man, Chase Hale. No, Chase said with a shake of his head. I'm just a man trying not to drown. Maybe we can tread water together for a while. She laughed, a real laugh this time, through her tears. Okay, she whispered, but I'll help too. With the house, expenses, I'm not dead weight. Chase smiled. Deal. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Chase borrowed the old dusty wheelchair from Mrs. Dottie and spent every waking hour working on the farmhouse. He built a ramp. He modified the bathroom, widening the door, adding grab bars. He cleared out his old office space and built a sturdy desk from reclaimed wood. Mrs. Dottie, seeing the flurry of activity, just brought over casseroles and blankets. "You make her feel like family, Chase," she'd ordered. The day Valentina was discharged, Chase drove to the hospital, Belle bouncing in her seat, chattering a mile a minute about everything she was going to show Valentina. Valentina was waiting by the door, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater. She looked nervous. "Ready?" Chase asked. Valentina stared at the old standard-issue hospital wheelchair he'd borrowed, then at the one from Mrs. Dottie. She lifted herself into it with a practiced, powerful efficiency. "It's perfect," she said. The drive was quiet. When they pulled up to the farmhouse with its peeling paint and sagging porch, Valentina just studied it. "It's beautiful," she said. "You're a terrible liar." "No, I'm serious," she insisted. It feels like a home." Chase lifted her from the truck, trying very hard not to notice how his hands lingered at her waist, how light she was. Inside, Valentina wheeled through each room, her eyes taking in everything. She stopped at the desk he'd built. You made this?" "It's nothing fancy." "Chase." She turned to look at him, her eyes shining. This is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." He didn't know what to say. How could that be possible? "You deserve kindness," he said simply. Their eyes locked, and the old drafty farmhouse kitchen felt very, very warm. Then Belle stumbled in, breaking the spell. "Miss Valentina, you're here. Come see my room. I'll show you everything." The moment broke, but the warmth remained. The first week was an adjustment. Valentina worked remotely, taking back control of her company from the farmhouse. Her sharp, commanding voice filled the old house as she spoke to lawyers and board members. Chase went back to his odd jobs, fixing roofs and leaky pipes. And Belle appointed herself Valentina's official helper. 1 butterfly, 2 butterfly, 3 butterfly. She'd count, her voice serious, as Valentina did grueling physical therapy stretches on the living room floor. In the evenings, after Belle was finally asleep, Chase and Valentina would sit by the old fireplace. And they talked. They talked about everything. She told him about the isolation, not just of the penthouse, but of being a CEO, and how her wheelchair. It had become both a challenge and a teacher. "People treat you differently," she said, her voice soft, staring into the flames. "They talk slower. They make decisions for you, without asking. They act like this disability defines you." Chase just listened, and after a long moment he said, "That must be exhausting." "It is," she admitted. "But it taught me who's worth keeping in my life." She looked at him then, the firelight reflecting in her eyes, a gaze that felt heavy with meaning. "Belle said, she told me, you're the only grown-up who doesn't talk to her like she's stupid." Chase just shook his head, a small smile on his face. "She's brilliant. Why would I?" "Exactly." That shared honesty seemed to open a door. Chase leaned back, the old armchair creaking. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. Cancer." He told her how fast it had been. 6 weeks, from diagnosis to... He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He told her about his business partner, Marcus, stealing everything while he was drowning in grief. Lost the house, the business, ended up here. This was all we had left. "I'm sorry," Valentina said softly. "The grief is one thing," Chase said, finding the words for it, maybe for the first time. "But the isolation after, they stopped calling. They didn't know what to say." "I understand that," Valentina whispered, her voice catching. "I understand that completely. When I had my riding accident, half of my friends vanished. Just gone. I wasn't convenient anymore." And so they just sat there, in the quiet, flickering light of the fire. 2 people who had been left behind by the world, finding a flicker of understanding in each other. "Can I ask you something?" Valentina's voice was tentative. "Anything. Why aren't you angry after everything you lost?" Chase was quiet for a long time, considering it. "Oh, I was," he finally admitted. "I was angry for months. Just a raw nerve of rage. But then one day Belle asked me why I was so sad all the time. She said her teacher told her that sad daddies can't see happy things. And it broke me. I realized I had a choice. I could either stay angry or I could find the good moments, no matter how small. He turned to look at her, his gaze intense. That's survival, right? You understand that. You've been surviving your whole life, proving yourself, building an empire, despite everyone telling you you couldn't. Chase, she began. I don't think you realize how extraordinary you are. He looked confused. You saved my life, she said, her voice gaining strength. You opened your home. You treat me like a person, not a charity case. You just see me. That's not extraordinary, he said, shaking his head. That's just being human. Yeah, she whispered. Maybe that's what makes it so rare. Their eyes met and held. Chase reached out, slowly, his calloused hand moving through the warm air. She didn't pull away. His hand covered hers and her fingers. They intertwined with his. They just stayed like that, for a long, long time. Hands clasped, hearts cautiously, finally weren't opening. The following weeks fell into a new, comfortable rhythm. Chase would make breakfast and head to his jobs. Valentina would command her global company from the desk he'd built, her sharp, confident voice a strange and welcome sound in the old farmhouse. Belle would come home from school, bursting with stories and pictures. Miss Valentina, look, I drawed you a picture of a CEO. This is wonderful, Belle. I especially love the butterfly wings. That's 'cause you're magical. Chase would just watch these interactions, his heart feeling too full. One evening, Valentina insisted on helping with dinner. They worked side by side in the small kitchen, a comfortable, easy dance, and Chase felt something fundamental shift. Later that night, after Belle's bedtime story, Chase came downstairs to find Valentina on the living room floor, pushing through her grueling physical therapy exercises. Need a spotter? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Always. He sat on the floor beside her, counting reps, watching the determination etched on her face. The exercises were grueling, but she pushed herself hard. Enough, Chase said finally, his voice gentle but firm. You're going to hurt yourself. One more set. Valentina. His hand covered hers, stilling her movement. It's enough. She looked at him, breathing hard, sweat on her temples. Then she nodded. Help me back. He lifted her carefully, as he had so many times now, settling her into the wheelchair. But instead of wheeling away, she stayed close, her knee almost touching his. Thank you, she said softly, for not treating me like I'm fragile. You, he said with a small laugh, are the least fragile person I have ever met. I feel fragile around you, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. In a good way, like it's okay to not be strong all the time. Chase crouched down, so they were eye level. The air between them felt charged, electric. Valentina's hand came up, her fingers trembling just slightly to rest against his cheek. Chase, I think I'm falling for you, and that terrifies me. His heart hammered against his ribs. Why? Because I've lost everything once, she whispered, her eyes searching his. I don't think I could survive losing you too. Chase covered her hand with his, turning his head to kiss her palm. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. No, he said, his voice raw with a truth he was only just discovering himself. But I know that finding you, that morning, was the first time in 2 years I felt like my life had purpose. I know that hearing you laugh with Belle makes me happier than I ever thought I'd be again. I know that when I come home and see you here, I feel like maybe I didn't lose everything. Maybe I just found something different. Valentina's eyes filled with tears. That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. Then people have been saying the wrong things. She pulled him closer, her hand moving from his cheek to the back of his neck. He wrapped his arms around her, and they just held each other. Two broken people, discovering that sometimes the broken pieces fit together perfectly. The next morning, Belle was the first one up, as always. She found them asleep by the cold fireplace. Chase was slumped in the armchair, his head bent. Valentina was in her wheelchair, her head resting on the arm of his chair. Their hands were still intertwined. Daddy, you're holding hands with Miss Valentina. Chase jolted awake, disoriented. What? What's wrong, sweetheart? Nothing's wrong, Belle declared, planting her hands on her hips. But you like her, which means maybe we're going to be a family. Valentina stirred, a sleepy, confused laugh escaping her. Good morning, Belle. Is it true? Belle demanded, marching closer. Do you like my daddy? Valentina looked at Chase, a blush rising on her cheeks. He looked back, his heart open. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. I do, very much. Is that okay? Belle's face split into the biggest, most radiant smile. It's the best. Can we have pancakes to celebrate? As Chase stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, he watched Valentina and Belle at the kitchen table. Belle explaining the complex social hierarchy of her first-grade class. This, he thought, this is happiness. 3 weeks in, Valentina's new custom wheelchair arrived. It was a marvel of engineering, sleek, black, high-tech, looking more like something from a sci-fi movie. It looks like a spaceship, Belle breathed, her eyes wide. But before Valentina even transferred into it, Belle appeared with a sheet of butterfly stickers. For good luck, she said seriously. Valentina looked at the incredibly expensive, state-of-the-art chair, then at the little girl's hopeful face. You're right, she said. Where should we put them? 20 minutes later, the sleek black chair was covered in sparkly, holographic butterflies. That evening, during a tense video conference with her board, one of the stuffy older members commented on the unconventional decorations. A gift from a friend, Valentina said smoothly, her voice leaving no room for argument. To remind me what really matters. November arrived with cold winds and dark evenings. Chase had finally saved up enough to fix his truck, which meant he could take on more jobs, but it also meant longer hours away from the farmhouse. One night he came home late, exhausted, to find Valentina on the phone. She was speaking rapid, sharp Spanish, and from her tone she was giving someone hell. She sounded commanding, powerful, every inch the CEO. When she hung up, she looked drained. Tough call, Chase asked, pouring a coffee. A former business partner, she sighed, trying to weasel out of a contract. He thought he could push me around because... She gestured, frustrated, to her wheelchair. What did you tell him? Valentina's smile was sharp and a little dangerous. I told him I survived attempted murder. I'm not afraid of him. Chase laughed, a deep, genuine laugh. Remind me never to cross you. You're safe, she said, her smile softening. You're not a business deal. What am I then? He asked, walking closer. She wheeled closer too. You're the person who makes me remember what it's like to feel safe. You're the reason I'm thinking about what comes after. After revenge. After I finish rebuilding my company. I've been so focused on survival, I forgot to think about what I actually want. Her gaze was locked on his. And lately, what I want looks a lot like this. Like you and Belle and this farmhouse. Chase's breath caught. Valentina. I'm not asking for promises, she said, pausing. But I need you to know, this isn't temporary for me. What I feel for you is real. Chase crossed the small space between them, dropping to his knees in front of her chair, so he was looking up at her. It's real for me too. Then, what do we do? She whispered. I don't know, he whispered back. But maybe we just keep going. Keep being honest. Keep seeing where this leads. Valentina's hand cupped his face. I can do that. He leaned forward, and this time, there was no hesitation. Their lips met. It was a kiss that was gentle and fierce and desperate all at once. A kiss that tasted like coffee and tears, and a future neither of them had dared to imagine. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Valentina smiled, a shaky, radiant smile. I think Mr. Bunny was right. Chase laughed, resting his forehead against hers. Don't tell Belle. Too late, Belle's voice called down from the stairs. I heard everything, and Mr. Bunny says, I told you so. They dissolved into laughter, a messy, happy, tangled sound, and Chase realized this. This chaotic, beautiful mess of emotions was exactly what he'd been missing. It was life, Real, beautiful, imperfect life. December brought snow and difficult news. The trial date was set for late January. "I have to go back," Valentina said one evening, her voice flat. They were by the fire again, but the mood was heavy. "The company needs me there. And the legal stuff." "I know," Chase said. He'd known this was coming. "Come with me." He looked up sharply. "What?" "You and Belle. Come to Chicago." Valentina rushed on, her words tumbling out. "I have a house in the suburbs. 4 bedrooms, a huge yard, excellent schools. And Chase, my company needs a new head of facilities and construction." "Valentina," he started, "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity," she insisted, grabbing his hand. "You built Caldwell Construction into a $3 million company before Marcus. You have the experience I need. And more than that." Her voice softened, but her gaze was fierce. "I'm falling in love with you, Chase Hale. Being away from you, it felt like torture. I don't want to do this separately. I want us together." Chase felt like the floor had just disappeared from under him. You love me?" "Yes, you idiot," she said, laughing through a fresh wave of tears. "I love you. I love your daughter. I love this stupid, broken-down farmhouse and your determination to fix everything. I love that you see me as a person. I love—" He kissed her, cutting off the words. When they broke apart, they were both crying. "I love you too," he whispered, his voice thick. I didn't think I could feel this way again." "You deserve everything," she said. "Let me give you that. Not as charity, but as someone who loves you." "What about this place?" Chase asked, looking around the living room that held so many ghosts. "Keep it," she said simply. "A retreat. But Chase, don't trap yourself in the past. Andrea, she would want you to live." He thought about Belle, who deserved so much more than a struggling father in a falling-apart house. He thought about the future he could build, if he was just brave enough to take it. Can I think about it?" "Of course." But Belle, eavesdropping again, apparently had different ideas. "Daddy," her little voice piped up from the hallway, "can we please go to Chicago? Please? Miss Valentina's house probably doesn't even have holes in the roof. And I really want us to be a proper family." Chase looked at his daughter's hopeful, shining face. Then he looked at Valentina, her careful, nervous hope, and he felt something crack open in his chest. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving. "Yeah," he said, a slow, wide smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, let's do it." Belle shrieked with a joy that shook the whole house. Valentina's face transformed with pure relief. And Chase, for the first time in 2 long, dark years, Chase felt like the future held promise. It held love. 4 months later, Chase stood in his new office on the 15th floor of the Cross Technologies Tower, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Behind him, his office door opened. "Mr. Hale, you have a visitor," his assistant said. Valentina rolled in, looking every inch the powerful CEO, a mischievous smile on her face. "Hey, stranger, lunch?" Chase grinned, leaning back against his desk. "The boss is asking me on a date? Consider it a performance review." She wheeled closer, and he leaned down to kiss her. The trial had concluded weeks ago. Veronica and the board members were convicted, facing decades in prison. Valentina, with Chase at her side, had restructured Cross Technologies completely, implementing new accessibility initiatives that Belle, of all people, had inspired. The company was thriving, but Chase knew the real story. It wasn't about a CEO reclaiming her empire. It was about 2 broken people finding each other in the wreckage and choosing to build something beautiful. "How's Belle?" Valentina asked as they rode the private elevator down. "Made 3 new friends today," Chase smiled. "Apparently, Mr. Bunny is a legend in the 2nd grade." They rode in comfortable, happy silence. The farmhouse still stood, back in Illinois. They visited on weekends, a place of quiet retreat. But Chicago had become home. At lunch in a fancy restaurant where the staff all knew her, Valentina pulled out a small velvet box. Chase's heart stuttered. "What's this?" Inside was a key. "The farmhouse," she said, her eyes shining. "I had it remodeled. New roof, new plumbing. Everything fixed. I thought maybe we could use it as a real retreat. Chase stared at the key. I, I don't deserve you. Yes, you do, she said firmly. You saw me when I was at my lowest, a monster in a ditch, and you didn't walk away. That kind of love, it saves lives, Chase. I love you so much it scares me. Good, he said, because I have one more thing. She pulled out another box. This one smaller. A ring. Simple. Elegant. Designed with a low profile, so it wouldn't interfere with her pushing the wheels of her chair. Marry me, Chase, she said, her voice clear and strong. Build a life with me. Not because I saved you or you saved me, but because we choose each other. Every single day. Chase couldn't speak. He just nodded and nodded until she laughed and he pulled her into a kiss, and the entire restaurant erupted in applause. That evening, when they picked up Belle from her playdate, she saw the ring on Valentina's finger and screamed, Mr. Bunny was right. We're going to be a family for real. Chase lifted his daughter high in the air, her laughter filling the room, and looked over her head at Valentina. The woman he'd found broken in a ditch, the woman who'd refused to give up, the woman who had taught him that second chances weren't just possible. They were real. Yes, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick. We're a family, the best kind, the kind we chose. That night, long after Belle was asleep, Chase and Valentina sat in their living room, the Chicago lights twinkling below. Do you ever think about that morning? Chase asked, his voice quiet. Every day, she admitted. If you'd left 5 minutes earlier, if the fog had been thicker, if you'd died in that ditch, he finished, his gut clenching at the thought. She ran her fingers through his hair. But I didn't. The universe, it was giving us both a second chance. You'd lost everything. I'd been betrayed, left for dead. Alone. We were both broken, Chase said. And broken things can be fixed, Valentina finished. Or, Chase said, standing up and moving to kneel beside her chair, rebuilt into something better. I have something to say. Okay, she said, her eyes wary. I loved Andrea. Part of me always will. But loving you doesn't diminish that. You're not a replacement, Valentina. You are. You are exactly who I'm meant to be with, right now. Chase. And I know you're scared, he continued, but I need you to hear this. I don't see your disability. I mean, I see you. I see your strength. I see a woman who runs a billion-dollar company, who survived attempted murder, and who decorates her brand-new wheelchair with butterfly stickers because a 6-year-old asked her to. I see real courage. Stop, she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. You're going to make me cry. One more thing, he said, his own voice cracking. He pulled a small, simple box from his own pocket. Inside was a ring, simple gold. But inscribed on the inside were coordinates, the coordinates of County Road 47, where he'd found her. Valentina Cross, he said, taking her hand. Will you marry me? Not because I saved you, not because you're giving me a job, but because I choose you, every day, for the rest of my life. She was crying fully now, just nodding, unable to speak. Yes, of course. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her with everything he had. Outside their window, the first snow of the season began to fall, and Chase finally, truly understood something fundamental. It's not about the disasters, it's about what you choose to do after. It's about the people you find in the wreckage, the hands you hold in the darkness, the love you build piece by piece from the broken fragments of your life. 2 years ago, he'd lost everything. 6 months ago, he'd found a woman dying in a ditch. Today, he had a family, a career, a future. And tomorrow held even more. The road ahead stretched before them, unknown and winding. But they'd walk it, or in Valentina's case, roll it, together. And that, he knew, made all the difference. Sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found when you're searching. Sometimes they're discovered when you simply stop to help someone else. When you choose compassion over convenience. When you see past the broken exterior to the fighting spirit underneath. Chase Hale had found Valentina Cross on the worst day of her life. But really, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd found themselves again. That was the real miracle. Not the survival, not the rescue, not even the love story. It was the reminder that no matter how broken you are, no matter how much you've lost, there's always a chance for something new, something beautiful, something worth fighting for. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it when it appears unexpected and impossible and absolutely perfect. Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you of the power we all have to change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, please don't just watch and walk away.